This conference will now be recorded.
See, the owl's talking to me.
That is so cool.
4:05, open the meeting.
All right, the meeting is now called to order. Let's see, I did make a copy of where did my copy of our agenda go? It was with all this stuff. Here we are. All right.
Here, guys.
We have minutes from March 6th to approve. Everybody's read them in detail by now, I assume.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second. Any comments, changes, or others? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, minutes are accepted.
Okay.
All right, so obviously, a lot has happened since we last met. The town has gone through numerous different aspects of what's going on with the finances. Not the least of which was the fact that we had submitted a report, which was then looked upon as something that needed some funding, which helped drive some of the discussion, which was really interesting to watch and listen to, I must say, because I wasn't necessarily expecting that, but there we are. And so we are now at the point where the town has moved towards the override issue as part of town meeting, and that's a whole thing separate from us. We don't need to necessarily, we need to recognize that it's happening, but our goal now is to start looking as to what comes next, because we have to start looking at next year's stuff after whatever gets approved, and we really can't make a lot of decisions about what we requested until we get past the town meeting and we see what got funding and what doesn't get funding. So with all of that in mind, this committee has an obligation to continue to meet on a regular basis, and especially as we wind around towards next year. Maybe May, June, July, and August aren't going to be as busy, but I would assume right after September 1st, more and more starts happening with regards to budget and budget making and whatever's being implemented and everything else. So we'll be putting ourselves in the position of asking for requests or submissions from each of the departments. So that'll line up with the school department and DPW and the other town departments. And I also see that next year, we're going to do more of the having questions and answers with all the various divisions in town government as needed. We'll follow your lead, Steve, obviously, on that, but as needed in terms of other groups that would need money that were included in here. That's part of what we're responsible for. Another part of what we're responsible for is to really take the full look at everything instead of just the 1 year look at what we need, but take a more comprehensive. We've talked about the 5 year look and try to get a sense of what's going on with that. And then last but not least, we have a number of times discussed that this form that exists may need some upgrading or whatever we want to do with it. I did bring a copy of the one that we edited with we put some edits into it, but we have to take a look at that and decide if that's what we want. And then the last piece that I saw is a couple of times we have talked about a way to categorize and prioritize and make a submission system that'll work for us in terms of how we receive things and how we can do that. It's not just going to be one, but maybe there's a numbering system we could use. Maybe there's a submission system we can use. We don't need to reinvent the wheel on that one, but we do need to come up with something that works where it might say DPW 001 is this request, DPW 002 is this request, so that we can categorize them by number and maybe by year, something like that, but have a way of keeping track. Because eventually what there'll be is whatever we want to call it, a master spreadsheet, which we have one of, but one that'll become ours as a committee, as opposed to what you've given us, so we can develop that. Those are the 4 or 5 priorities that I see for us coming along. And then I would say, now that I've already said last but not least, but there's actually one more, which is how we work on the integration of this committee in with the other committees that are working on budget issues, as we go through this whole cycle of where we make our recommendations to the select board, how we have our correspondence with other committees, and how the discussions go with regards to all of that. And so that if there's a need for information from the capital committee in a select board meeting, in a finance committee meeting, in a school committee meeting, we can sit in with them if we need to, or have a member go to one of their meetings to talk to them about what's going on if there are questions that come up. So with that, I think I put out 5 things in my three things identified that we need to move forward.
Was that the next part of the agenda?
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Can I go backwards for just
No.
a minute?
Yes, that got me thinking, but I wanted to be able to explain as we're doing this where we're at. But well phrased.
Okay. I had a couple of questions about
Sure.
the materials that Steve Williams presented to us, and then there was a comment about meeting, the presentation. Do we want to do that last, or are we doing that first? Because I feel like the majority of the meeting should be spent on what the process is going forward, and we should,
Yeah.
like you said,
Yeah.
agenda and make some goals to go
Yeah.
forward.
So when you said meeting,
The presentation that you made to the
Oh.
select board.
So I'd like to make a comment on that because it affects how we go forward. And that is that on the 17th, when you did the presentation to the select board,
Yeah.
I was very, very impressed with how seriously they took our recommendations and our list and without trying to second guess or question or anything else, they said, well, if that's what this group has said is high priority, then that's high priority. And we have to find a way to fund it. We have to find a way to get it done. We have to find a way to push it through. Having said that, that puts pressure on us going forward in being very careful of what we define as high priority. Because I was super impressed with the way the select board took it, the way they incorporated it, and then moved forward in the budgeting process, saying, if this is what needs to get done, then this is what needs to get done. So going forward, we need to keep that in mind that when we say something is a high priority or a medium or a low, it carries a lot of weight, tremendous amount of weight. And that's why, to me, it's important going forward.
Yeah,
Keep
I
that
also
response in mind.
I wanted to discuss with the committee, it was my understanding that we had prioritized things. And Eric, at one point, you represented that the prioritization wasn't necessarily as well thought out as I thought we had established.
Mhm.
So I was just wondering, in future years, I thought the prioritization, not just the solicitation of items,
Mhm.
but I thought the prioritization and the balancing between departments was in fact this committee's charge.
I agree.
It is.
Yeah.
Just so we're clear.
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to add that the priorities, the jobs that are prioritized, might get looked at like really a phone system in a school when we have another school with leaks in it.
Yeah.
And it's prioritized based on the policy that's presented to us. That sets the guidelines for the priorities. And that has to do with state mandates.
Yep.
Or legislative requirements, which is right near the top, so.
I agree. And I will admit that one of the challenges with that meeting in particular was giving delivery without any of the sound system. You had to work your way through all that. So it was easier. The longer I was talking, the easier it got, basically. So for that.
Yeah, all things considered, I think part of the schedule we talk about too should perhaps be that our presentation gets done when the agenda might not be as full.
Yes.
Or as.
Hopefully there won't have that many people at every select board meeting for.
Well, I didn't mind all the people, but you were a little pressed for time.
Yep.
And they had bigger issues to.
I want to make one other comment, which is that I have a feeling that Mr. Williams worked hard on this to make sure that this was part of the agenda going forward in terms of the budget because of how important it is to him. And we appreciate that and the town appreciates that because we not only were met as a committee and we not only created what we did, but it was treated with the level of whatever you want to call it, certainty that it needed. It was trusted and respected.
Respect,
Yeah.
I think.
Yep.
Treated with respect.
Now, if you don't mind, the spreadsheet that was handed to us has a town manager recommendation added to the bottom of it. Is that something that came up after we had screened everything? Was this new?
Well, I'll go over all of it if the chair will.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So there's two pages to the document. One is the majority of the paper is, there's only four lines on it. We had some extra reimbursement money coming to the town through our Veterans Affairs Office this year. There's money that we had budgeted for programming. And the state came up with some extra funding, so it came in. So that money is available. It was on the town side of the budget. And coincidentally, at about the same time, I received a phone call from our public works director that the air conditioning unit on the town hall was not operational. The recommendation was to replace it. We were able to get a quote for about $3,000 to put a patch in it and keep the thing going for the spring, the shoulder months. You know, it's going to be warm days and cold days. I authorized that work and said, get me a quote to replace it for the summer because we can't have the town hall air conditioning unit going down in the summer. This building gets extremely hot. It was not built for passive cooling. So it gets hot quickly in here, and we have to let the employees go home because they can't work in 85, 90 degree temperatures inside the building. So we have that quote. So we had $58,503.
How much?
$58,503 extra funds in our FY25 budget. So I immediately pivoted that towards the town hall air conditioning unit, which was $46,632. I needed to find a place for the balance of that money so that at the special town meeting, May 31st, we could allocate it towards something.
Yep.
You'll see here that I put it towards Jabersbrook asbestos abatement. The reason I did that is because if you refer to the larger sheet,
Yep.
what you're gonna find here is a list that looks very similar to what the high priorities were in the committee's report.
Right.
I'd like to thank the committee for that report. I thought it was clear, concise, direct to the point, and it was very helpful for me in what I needed to do.
Yep.
I think you did a good job putting it together, and of course, Eric and Linda being in all your meetings, I'm sure helped.
Yep.
So I took those 11 items that you had on there, and I started with the money that we have available through our free cash policy, which is $420,912. I used my discretion, and I started at the top, and I worked my way down to see what was debt. So you have your list of items, you have your amounts next to them, and then you have the funded amounts. What was funded was very similar with the exception of the EMS building. I took some of the scope of work out of that. The first item was some furnishings. We'll have to find some used stuff. Second item was the HVAC system, the boiler. It's still functioning. If we have to, we'll get by for another year. So that brought the project down to under 74,000. The town hall repointing, the brick repair. The front of the building is the high priority area because we had some leakage last year. That estimate is really an unknown, 150,000. When the contractor gets here, gets on site and starts really digging into it to see what the damage is, we'll be able to refine that. So in talking with the contractor, Linda was able to determine that if we got a $50,000 amount, we could get started and see how far that brings us, and we can kind of gauge what's left.
The front of the building is considered the street side. This is considered, okay.
Yes, the street side, north.
Forward Street.
So that rounded out to 429.12, as you'll see. The select board,
And this is very consistent with what you've been saying all along, that our job would be to prioritize, and then as you work down the list, you kind of shuffle through depending on the size of the dollars and what's available. So what you've got right here is extremely, is right in line with what you've been commenting all along. Okay.
so the select board decided, now, let me back up, 420,000 is what was available out of the free cash. That number is fluid, it's gonna change every year. I hope it's more every year, but let's see. Select board decided to put a line item budget for capital into the override.
Yes.
That'll be a reoccurring amount if it passes 500,000. It only has to really technically go there 1 year. After that, it could be subject to some reappropriations, but I think there'd be a hard argument to say the taxpayers voted for capital, it's gonna stay in the capital budget. So I think every year we're gonna have $500,000 available. So I went back to the top of the list and said, okay, where are the holes that I need to fill? The DPW radio system repeater was one that I skipped over. I did that because Linda and I worked with one of our firefighter captains, who was able to locate a used repeater from another community. So we're gonna be implementing that used one.
Sorry, can I just come out or are we? So the 500 is not on top of 420?
It isn't.
That's on top of them.
Okay, so there'll be a secondary list that will eventually total, well, this will get revised to have 920 at the bottom.
Well, that's the far right column, if you look at that.
Oh, so you're adding the 420 to the 480?
Right.
Okay, yeah, there's no.
Steve,
Okay.
just out of sheer curiosity, if we do wait, how would the tariff situation affect the price of that system,
That's just-
the HVA system that we're talking about?
Oh, it could, but if we're short, we can probably make the building budget or something. I don't think it's gonna be a deal breaker. It's a concern across the board.
Yeah.
And just for 1 second, could you just educate me on how did the 420 come about?
That's,
It's free cash that was in the budget. Is it the finance committee that come up with it? Is it something that you work on every year? I just want to be educated.
Ultimately, it's the select board's decision. The select board is the authority, the finance committee is advisory. They've been working together on free cash policy. This year we had 61.7 million. We are trying to wean ourselves away from the use of free cash in our operating budget and utilize it for other items. Last year, we did a 80-20 split. This year, we're 60-40 split. So 40% of the free cash will go to other accounts. Those other accounts are free cash capital, our stabilization fund, which is our savings account, and our capital.
right.
Those are also broken up into 65, 35, 60, 35, 5. That's where the 420 came from. So next year, we have 1.7, it'll be a similar number. But they're also working on the ratio, the 60-40 ratio. Next year, the 60, the year after that, they're going to be 80.
So is the 420 a reflection of the, whatever that is, that small percentage that was,
Yes.
okay.
Go ahead.
And so the select board said, we've got 420 in free cash this year. We need 500,000 added to that. And we're gonna go to the 2.5 override and ask for that.
Correct.
If that passes, that 500 is a recurring amount, but it's not guaranteed to be used for capital. It's a good faith effort that it will be, but the dollars are fungible. Going forward, though, the free cash amount is going to decrease.
No,
So,
not necessarily. I think it's going to increase because we're going to start putting more of the free cash into those other accounts.
I'm sorry, going forward, the free cash available for capital projects, will that decrease?
I hope not. I'm hoping it goes.
You are
It'll-
hoping that will go up as well. And what I'm trying to get at is kind of the magnitude of the bucket that will be available, roughly in fiscal year 26, 27, 28, 29 kind of numbers. So if the good faith of the 500,000 for capital stays, then next year for our planning purposes, we would be in the 900 to that kind of $1 million area.
That's fair.
Okay,
So-
that's where I'm trying to understand is
I think that,
what guidelines we should kind of put in the back of our mind.
I think the challenge, I think you're identifying a real challenge for the town, which is that if the override does pass and there's monies that are allocated towards the town and towards the schools and for capital planning, we all have to recognize that that was how they were dedicated and allocated. The other part to this is that because we're not an operating budget type committee, like the DPW or the school department, we need somebody to help watchdog that money. And I think the way that you're pointing it out, where you're gonna, as when you align budgets, you'll say, okay, this is here and that's there. That'll be important. So I think that I think you've made a really strong point that has to remain an allocation assuming the override passes, to help us address that issue. Because that was also part of the discussion that the select board had about approving this money, that it was needed because the gap was so large between the number of projects and the cost of all those projects and the amount of money we have available.
Right. So that's something I'm gonna be keeping an eye on closely for the next 10 years or so. So as we work down that, I did add in the wheel loader purchase, I added the rest of the money back into the building renovation for IT. And then one of the dump truck bodies. I skipped the second dump truck body and I added in the hot air units for the police and fire. I'm hoping that next year we could revisit the other truck body and any remaining repointing of the town hall. So that worked up to $484.38, which left a balance of $19,652.
So wait, the two that were really taken out were the radio system at 30,000 and the dump truck body at 100,000.
The radio system is gone.
Yeah.
So we still have the truck body and some repointing. So that 19,652, if I add it to the amount at special town meeting of 11,871,
Yeah.
it gives Eric roughly enough to get a room done. He's probably gonna be a little short. But it's certainly a step in the right direction for some
So
additional.
the 19,652 would get added.
That's part of the abatement that you've been chipping away. That you've been doing in segmented portions.
You've been using operating expense for that.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So I did check with Brian about that.
Just
Whatever
checking,
money he gets, we'll make it work.
just checking with both of you that the 19,652 will be added to the 11,871 as the total value of the project, whatever you're trying to do for asbestos abatement. Okay.
So again, I can't say enough about Linda and Eric being here for all these meetings and working through this. I think we got a good list. We tackled some items that have been lingering for a while. Now that we've been through one cycle, I think at least this part of it will go a little bit smoother. Hopefully we can get through the rest of the items right. And I know the committee wants to revise the request form.
Yeah.
Maybe some changes to the policy. Again, it's a policy, so it's not board's prerogative to change it to the town meeting. It's not a bylaw. So whatever you come up with over the next few months, the hard work will start again in September, reviewing the request. Any questions on-
Why September,
Um,
other than tradition?
I like tradition sometimes, but if the board wants me to do it another time, that's fine. I guess, again, we're sitting here today, it's 3 months before the beginning of the fiscal year. If I reach out to department heads in July and say, I want your FY27 capital list, that's 12 months away.
Yeah.
You gotta have some, I would actually like to push it later into the year. But I also recognize that December, January, we're starting with preliminary budgets and department heads have a lot of work to do with that. So I try to get the capital in first. But I end it with the caveat, you can still submit things late because we will consider them. It's not a hard deadline. Just like the rule, we will address it one way or the other.
I think that two things that certainly could become a priority of this committee in the interim is, one, to review this whole process to make sure we're all comfortable with what it is. And then the second one is that at some point, we're gonna have to create our own spreadsheet of all the projects as they exist in a different format than what you did. And I think deciding on that is probably gonna take a little more time than we realize, because we're trying to make it operable and doable and not like this big massive spreadsheet from hell that then we can't work with, so.
Yeah, I guess I have a little concern with, I would have a goal that we could get. Some of the areas seems like the numbers were, but sometimes the numbers are gonna be darts on the board. And sometimes you have to do that. But sometimes I think there's gonna be opportunities to get numbers that are more defined, particularly on the bigger projects. And sometimes I also think some of the projects need to be planned first. And maybe there's a FY26 expenditure to do that, and then the actual project goes into FY27. And while I understand tradition, I think part of the planning process is really continuing to look further and further ahead. We're trying to go from 1 year to 5 years. And, I think that the longer people have to think about it, then the better the information you may end up having with. So I just would throw that out there as a balance. I mean, obviously we have to wait till after the year's over and, give you some time. July's probably full of vacations too. So there's all that to be in play, but I would just, those are just my goals or my wishes if we got a little bit better information.
Yeah. And I think how we present the information will be important going forward too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and Linda and I have had these conversations about trying to get, better refined estimates. It's difficult. The contractors know when they provide an estimate to the municipality.
It's based on that day and time too.
And they do it as a favor. We've worked a little bit with RS means, but we're just scratching the surface. I know Brian and I have talked about that. So a lot of times we're reaching out to vendors that we use repeatedly because they're the ones most likely to say, yeah, this, but if we tell them this is a ballpark, we just need an estimate. And a lot of times they say, yeah, I know the building is going to be this much.
Yeah.
So it's, and we're usually pretty close. But there's other projects, these bigger projects, we need better.
Yeah, I don't think it's a serious number of projects, but some of the projects, it seems like we may want to identify those a little bit earlier in the prioritization process.
I guess we could also turn that question back to the three of you, which is, do you see if there's any better ways to provide us with information or, the flow of information or how we communicate about that information? Because we did everything in kind of a matter of fact, but rushed fashion to get to the point we're at today, which is this year. But I think the discussion we'd really want to have with all three of you is sort of, what do you see as the next 5 years in terms of what you're looking at in your departments, bigger and more than we've seen so far? Or should we take that and list and revamp it based on the knowledge of what you know today? Does some things change? And I'm just leaving those as open questions. I'm not asking you to answer them today. I'm saying that I think that in light of that 5-year, 10-year window type process, we have one of our challenges is also to identify short versus long, but not in the way that we did, but in a way that allows the town to be more understanding of the needs we've got, whatever they are.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion is that these numbers, if they were 20% difference, weren't going to change our prioritization. So and it's not our job to make sure they're getting the best numbers, and it's not our job to say that these are specific. I just think there are some projects that come through. I don't know whether it was 3 or 5, but when I read the list, some of them looked like they could use advanced, a 2-year cycle before it's funded.
Right.
Because the second half of this is if Linda decides to just say, okay, 200 for this, 350 for that, 500 for this, we're going to start getting big numbers for DPW, and she's not going to get as much done as if she, I'm just using you for an example, as if she had gotten slightly better prices on those things. So it's in everybody's best interest to do a little bit of it, but obviously you can't spend the whole job trying to get good estimates.
Well, and a lot of times those estimates are good for 90 days.
Yeah.
And by the time we get to that project, it's 6 months, so we
I'm getting-
go out again.
For 14.
I'm getting 3 days, especially with electrical stuff. Yeah.
Plumbing is 24 hours.
Yeah.
You're done.
It's
We
unbelievable.
don't care, copper's, come on.
Yeah. But I got a quick question on the same thing, Steve, and I know my email was forwarded to you. Can capital be considered operating expense loosely?
Yeah, if there's capital debt exclusions, which is our line. That's a different portion of Mass General Law.
Yeah.
For Proposition 2.5. Because it's reoccurring, it's okay.
Because I noticed that the ballot question didn't say anything about capital, it just said for operating expenses. And
Right.
I was wondering if we could actually use some of that money for this purpose.
Yeah, I'll double check.
For the first year. I'm sure we're splitting hairs here because we could just work the warrant, so the other money
Actually,
that we raise could be used for capital.
Actually,
not this.
I believe, my understanding of it, because I had to deal with this in one of the communities we work with, is that it's actually the reverse of that. A debt exclusion is money you're borrowing for capital projects, specifically, whatever they are, a new roof, whatever, a senior center.
Period of time.
Whereas when you do a Proposition 2.5 override, it is global in the budget. It goes across the entire budget, and then that money then gets committed in accordance with what was ever the criteria that it was set up with. So the fact that a realistic criteria was set up where so much is going to this and so much is going to that, it's to everybody's benefit in terms of when it's all done, that we're not like saying, I should get more of that, or you should get more of that. It's laid out the way that the town sees it best being allocated.
Yeah,
My understanding is for the first year, it has to be spent as a ballot
Right.
question.
I think
Breeze.
people are,
Yeah.
with the water in minds, if they
Yep.
didn't stick more than 1 year.
Yeah.
There's a very real need with capital. And if somebody tries to move it towards something else, it's not gonna go away.
Yeah.
You know, just like a lot of other people, I'm sticking my neck out for the solar.
Yep.
And the money needs to go where we said it was going to. That's my opinion.
I just want to make sure that if that money that is approved, if the 2.5 override goes through, can go to capital. I think we need to advocate for that. And if there is a sticking point with the ballot question, not specifically stating for capital, just for operating expense, then we
I don't think there is.
we have to address that with the warrant articles for operating, but it may,
I think we're in the clear, but.
it may really mean nothing.
I also think that part of what we can do as a committee is really explore what the role of this committee can be for the town over the long term as well. Because I know a number of towns have a process where it really is the select board, the finance committee, and the capital planning committee with the school committee attending that make a lot of the decisions for the town going forward based on. We have a different knowledge set than the finance committee has. We have a different knowledge set than the select board has. And to bring all those things together is of great value.
You know, I was gonna ask about that because, you know, the whole Proposition 2.5 thing, it takes care of, you know, fiscal year 26, okay? But what's gonna happen in 27? Are we gonna have to do the same thing all over again? So would we be able to maybe look at the tax base and see what's going on? And, you know, maybe we have to, you know, reassess the tax rate, you know? I mean, it's, you know, the economy is what it is and it just keeps going up. And I didn't know if that's something that we as a committee can make a recommendation.
I don't think we touch the tax rate.
I don't think we touch the amount of money.
No.
I think we make suggestions or we're showing a need
We-
that's substantial and we're letting them come to the conclusion that there needs to be more capital
Yeah.
in order to keep the buildings operating that provide the services.
We can say it'll be good if they fund the things we prioritize. That's what we can say.
We made a case for, let's see, $6,722,000.
Right.
And narrowed it down to 1.3, so. Everybody knows that there's not enough money to go around.
How does the committee feel about making a schedule?
Schedule for us to meet?
Not only us to meet, but then goals of what we're gonna try to get accomplished. And then
Yeah, I
also
think those.
Let the town department heads and the town manager know that they're welcome to meetings, but perhaps it won't be necessary for us to see them until, let's say, September.
I think that's very well said. Get out of here.
No.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
But, I mean,
Before you do leave, one of the things that Eric had thrown out earlier was input from you on are there better ways to get the information to us? Is there, what's the best way? Is a form working or is there a better way to do it, whatever? So between now and our next meeting or the meeting after that, think about what's a good way to give us the information that reflects your level of this is what I've got to have and this is why I've got to have it kind of thing.
And the school department is the only one right there to give us a 5-year goal. And we probably need to get a form together and get it in to prioritize, for look ahead, what we're gonna need in a couple of years, and so that we can at least get the process started and in our report show it as such.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Linda.
I did provide to you, so the entire fleet and the expected years.
Yep.
So you have an idea of what we're looking at for
Yep.
life expectancy and buildings as well, mechanical. So
Yep.
there's a little bit of that going on,
That's,
to give you an overall heads up of what DPW looks like.
that's why I think your idea is so good, is that we can lay out a schedule which would do both. It would both prioritize what we need to do and what we need to have brought into us. And now may be a really good time for me to bring that guy in from South Hadley and have him talk to us. He's been serving on his capital committee forever. That might be a good place to start with some other information.
Sure. I don't, what are our goals between now
That's right.
and September? We need to get a new form.
We need,
Well,
go ahead.
When did
We
they
need to
do by?
prepare. We need to,
They're due by the end of
Revise, right?
September, right?
Thank you, Steve.
Your requests are due by September 30th?
that's what they were in the past. It was September 1st or September 30th.
Okay, so we probably need to get them a new form sooner rather than later.
I think our goal should be to have a revised form.
Right,
Or a new form.
yeah, well, revised, same.
So on the agenda, item
I-
6 is the revised form,
Right.
but item 5 is for us to come up with a system of how we're gonna do
Yeah, I
a
don't wanna talk
5-year
about-
plan.
I don't want to do the form itself. I'm just saying that's kind of the first step in the things that we need to do.
I'm thinking it's the second step, and the first step is,
Okay, I'm
What-
saying
what
it's a
approach-
step. We can reprioritize
okay,
the steps.
what is the system that we need to build?
What is the process?
What's the process?
Yeah. I think it's a chicken and egg proposition. It doesn't, I don't think it matters which one you call out first. The fact is, there is a process in place. We have to decide if that is the process we want to stick with, or is there something we want to put in place for this committee to do what it needs to do?
Well, I think we need a new and revised form.
Yep.
I would prefer a simple but some sort of numbering or nomenclature system
Right.
for the requests. I would also like more of the departments to be involved.
We should see if they have a cost center number. You know, like when I was in banking, we had a cost center.
Yeah, it was addressed at one meeting, but we
Is it?
should probably,
We got to go back.
we need to recircle that.
Yeah.
One other thing I was thinking about too was, while we're going over these budgets and prioritizing them, why not have the head of each department, or request the head of each department come in and justify why it's a high, medium, or low?
Yeah, I think we did it
We did that.
with the representatives here today, but.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean,
We did do it with others. and then
Exactly.
I think we could also give them a break and say, you both don't need to come to every meeting.
That's right.
Yeah.
We could schedule them, we're gonna need a.
Here's my proposed solution to all that, which is that we schedule ourselves out in terms of our meetings, and then you'll know that schedule, and it'll be up to us to say, notify you, or if you think you're ready to come talk to us. We know starting September, October, things will happen, but I don't have a lot of expectation that you'll need to be here for the next couple, 3 months just to watch us talk through some of this stuff. However, the one point I do want to make with regards to that is that the two of you have been in the system in terms of working within the system. So if there's things that you're frustrated about, or if there's things that you like, it would be good to know them.
Professionally, not personally.
We know what they're frustrated with, there's no money.
Besides money,
They keep asking.
so I think it's cool that we're at the beginning of a process whereby we can help define the parameters to what comes next. Yeah. And I think we can make it, fun's too strong a word, but at least make it valuable for everybody to be part of and not overwhelming, so.
I also want to add that, I understand, not needing department representation in all these meetings, but they are both our members of this committee.
Oh, yeah.
They are members of this committee.
No, they're ex officio members.
They're ex officio, but they're still.
Associate members or something.
Yeah.
You're not voting members, you're not
But
nominating.
just being sensitive to the fact that.
That's why I said we can leave it as, we can set our schedule and then we can determine when it's best and et
I
cetera.
just don't want to make it sound like you're not well.
So let's start with, let's start
You're an
with,
independent group called Friends of the.
let's start with the basic question. We got to pick a day of the month we want to meet, et cetera. What, if we're going to meet once a month or twice a month, et cetera. Let's establish that and we can go from there as to what we want to do. We've made it all the way through to this point.
Just for FYI purposes, the clerk's office likes to know the date and For instance, I now have the Building Grounds Committee meeting every third Tuesday.
Right.
And that way it can go on the calendar so people can see that. And then you send in your agenda and that goes along with the date. So, I guess they're not thrilled to be jumping around, Tuesday one time, Thursday,
Nope.
3 weeks, that kind of thing.
I think we should
Well, I
find
think
it.
it's just easier to also get it scheduled too, because I
Yeah.
have to reserve the room.
Room reservation,
With,
yeah.
one of the administrators in the.
Yep.
The Henry House call them.
Pam and Melissa.
So,
Yeah.
I was referring to them official title.
What night does school committee meet? And select board meets Mondays, so Wednesdays would be better to get
We're
coverage.
available Monday and Wednesday.
All right, so Wednesdays? 4 to 5:30, 4 PM to 5:30? Are we, okay. Which Wednesday do we prefer?
Would end of month be advisable?
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I have, the Ag Commission meets on the first Monday.
First Monday.
So
But I want to avoid the select board meetings, because what Mr. Williams is important.
Oh, I'm sorry, the first Wednesday.
First
So
Wednesday.
Let's,
How many times a month do you want to meet?
Yes.
I think we should schedule one, and when we get to the busy signal, we can add to that.
Yeah, so the second Wednesday of every month at 4.
Okay.
does that work for you, Brian? And Eric?
I'm pretty
I'll
sure.
probably miss July, but other than
Yeah.
that,
I meant time of day.
I'm going to a guitar camp, sorry.
I-
Not skipping that for this.
That sounds cool. Where does that happen?
Down in the Catskills.
Cool.
Yeah. what we call it.
Oh, that's too bad.
Where in the Catskills?
All right, we're,
Indian Hollow.
Yeah, that's all right.
Is the name of town? It's Fred
I know somebody else who goes to that.
so
So,
that's okay. You need a guitar, I'm selling you a guitar.
My husband.
All right.
I'll talk, but if it's, I might be interested.
okay, second Wednesday,
4 to 5:30.
I only have 6.
you will notify the town clerk?
Yeah,
I'll put together a whole thing and all that good stuff.
I'll reserve the room and that kind of stuff.
So if we decide we don't want to meet in either July or August, because it's summertime and et cetera, and so forth, that will be ours to call.
So that'll be May, June, July, August. Those 4 months are gonna be once a month.
Well, can we knock out the 3 things I think I heard, which were the form, a master spreadsheet, and a numbering system, all by June 30th?
I think we can.
Well, I think the 5-year format, that doesn't necessarily need to be done
Yeah.
by September. It'd be nice if it was, but.
I think it'd be,
I think the shell of it should be done so that
Alright.
we know whether or not we move columns around and renumber thing. I agree that it doesn't need to be.
It wouldn't bother me if we did a 1 year this year. And it wouldn't bother me if next year.
So we got next year's already half of it.
No.
done.
Next year, if we did like a 2 or a 3-year plan. And then the year after that, say, here's the full 5-year look forward.
Well, I think that's really work probably in December and January.
yeah,
right?
we're not gonna know a lot
Because
between.
I think setting up a program for whether it's 2 years or 5 years is
It
gonna.
would be the same.
We have,
You're right, you're right.
we have more time than we realize, because I just know the process. It's really not gonna be, things aren't gonna really start moving until November
Right.
in terms of realistic
Right.
assumptions and numbers. Nobody, so from there, by June 30th, I don't know, but I think that,
Right.
I think the idea of starting to define the process, making sure we have a form that works to get us the information we want.
Mhm.
So I think that, and creating a system, I think learning about systems in other places wouldn't hurt us. And if anybody's ever participated in a system that's worked well, we could just certainly listen to that as well.
One of the things I think we can incorporate that they didn't do before, well, maybe they loosely did it before, is the department heads.
That was-
What's your priorities? We're not here to tell you what you need more than something else. And we can loosely work backwards from there.
So,
And
That's why I suggested having the department heads come here and then we're going over.
so when you come in, when we get these, we know what your priorities are.
Yeah.
I mean, immediate needs and
so
everything, and that way,
I just had an idea that may work.
It'll
Just like
make it easier and more streamlined.
That's what I was gonna play with.
I hope it's not.
Can I just ask a quick question? Who came up,
What we say?
who basically is
Second
requiring the
Wednesday.
5-year projection?
But
It'll
the
be
policy,
May 14th.
Really?
yeah, some policy.
Yeah, I'm going that way, just to start things off well.
That's our job.
And then June 11th is the next one. May
Yeah,
14th
I
is
won't be here.
I heard that both of you said you're not gonna be here.
I'll be here.
Oh, you'll be
here.
Yeah.
And you may not be.
And let's be realistic, like, when we do a 5-year plan, years 3 through 5.
Yeah.
Are, it's,
The stuff that doesn't get in the high priority.
yeah, it's,
Yeah.
it's,
Or some of them could be the longer projects where, if there's a renovation to one of the school buildings that's several, that's $1 million or a few $1 million.
working plan.
There may be $100,000 project to do the planning and the bid documents and that sort of stuff the year before.
All right, so let's deal with this in 2 chunks then. Maybe the way to start looking at this is, let's finish out the fiscal year with May 14th and June 11th, right? Those are the second Wednesday of those 2 months.
Okay.
So that gets defined by the fiscal year. And then for next fiscal year, starting in July, we'll lay out the schedule of the second Wednesday of every month. And if we need more than that, as we get into budget season, then we'll add to that.
And we won't meet until September?
No, we will decide what we need to do with July and August. That gives us 2 months to work on a few things, and then we can decide what we need to take on for the summer. Maybe we'll have one in July, but not August, or August and whatever. We can figure that out.
We're gonna reserve the room anyways.
I think you should just book the whole year straight and book them, because I think
It's easier.
if you have, it's Ira, is that who you're suggesting comes to talk to us?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if he comes next month, let's say, and then the forms the following month, because we need to get the form to the department heads in July. Then work on the 5-year spreadsheet and nomenclature we could be doing
Yep.
by ourselves. And we could elect to, if 3 people say they're not gonna be here, then we
Yep.
could elect to just skip the meeting.
Right, or move it, or whatever.
Well, that's what they would post on the town calendar anyway, it would say canceled.
well, here's an idea, and it may make sense, it may not. Do we need something like this for all 5 years?
No.
Or just like for the first year, and then the other years
What
could
do you
just
mean,
be?
the form for each?
Yeah, or
I think,
I like your thinking.
or maybe for the first 2
I
years.
I think we should come with a clean piece of paper to the next meeting and not worry about what any of this looks like.
Yeah.
That was where I was just starting to look at everything. I think if we start clean next meeting with just trying to say, what do we got? What do we want to do? We'll put ourselves in a good place. We can use the board there. We can come up with some ideas. I love facilitating meetings like that where we can just brainstorm. I think that'd be a really good time to have the 2 of you. Now that we've said don't come to meetings, that would be a good one to have you at. And then we can break free
I
from
would
it.
just like it noted on the record that I was the one who was proposing. Nice guy, couple nights off.
Don't want to
Just
create
saying.
any unnecessary.
No, but I think that's a really good use of our May meeting.
I still worry about, and since I'm not gonna be here at that meeting, I'm gonna take a minute to tell you what my priorities are for that form. The more specificity makes people take it more serious, and that's just human nature. And I know these 2 do it on a regular basis, so they're probably gonna be more serious, but we haven't met some of the other people who don't do it on a regular basis, and, asking them for more information that they may think of on their own might lead us to some better answers. I really also think we need to prioritize grants and grant funding, and that needs to get on the form somehow, and it needs to be given priority from this committee. That departments who spend time applying for grants and receiving grants should get our attention.
When they crossed into the capital expenditure zone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not just, yeah.
Well, here's a simple question I have for you guys on this. Fill these out, and do they get submitted electronically, or or is it turn into both, where there's a paper system side by side with the electronic system?
Electronically.
Okay.
No.
So I get them over.
The schools request their own grants, but town, is it a single grant writer for the town now upstairs in Doug's
There
office?
is, but, the department heads are still taking on
Doing a
the
lot
grants that
themselves.
they're.
Through her, through the new grant writer, or do you?
No,
do
like,
your
so the
own?
grants that I regularly come out of my office, I continue to manage them and
So it's,
timelines.
to follow what you said, I think it's gonna behoove the department heads, as everybody prepares their budgets, say this is funded through a grant, this is not funded through a grant. I think you're right. It needs to be somehow recognized in the process.
I think you need
Well,
to
some of
put
it
it,
is leverage.
you need to, notify us, but we have no say in it.
Of course not.
Okay, because, you know, the building and ground committee, we got $215,000. And so it's really not an operating, item.
Yeah, see,
So, did I say something wrong?
no,
So I mean, we should be informed about it, but we shouldn't be able to have any kind of a say in it, say, well, you know, you should put it towards this, or you should put it towards that kind of thing.
no, but if she, just for example, if Eric's looking to do the roof at Javish Brook.
Yeah.
The MSBA has a roof repair program.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the cost share is 20%. So if he comes and says, I need $1 million for the roof, but I've applied for the grant, but that grant money is going to be this year and this year only, the program expires next year, we need to look at that and say, that's leveraging funds from
That's true,
outside.
and I agree with
That would
that.
up the priority probably over
Yes, but
something
what I'm
else that
talking
isn't
about is just the grant alone. So if
Oh.
I've got an expense, you know, like, we'll work on Tadgell School, that's gonna be $1 million roof.
Right.
If we try to get that taken care of and we get a grant, we would basically tell you about it and just say, here's what's going on. I have to report on it anyway, and so does, who's the grant writer now? I can't remember. her name.
Allison?
Allison has to keep track of that and notify the state. So that situation, we maybe get copies of that, but this committee does not have the ability to say high priority, mid, low.
No, but if you were coming to us for the roof for Tadgell School.
No, I understand that. If
Okay.
there's an element where we have to expend money from the operating budget,
Right,
then
yes.
we have a say.
Yeah, yeah.
But if it's a.
But even not, Linda is gonna have some, do you have any roadways on the tip now?
Yeah, well, not on the tip.
So some of the roadways get done through Mass DOT's tip
Correct.
process.
Yeah.
And the design needs to be done upfront, it's coming
Right,
to about
it takes 10
20% of the
years.
cost, 15 to 20% of the cost is designer fees.
Mhm.
And she, I think, has taken some of them out of chapter 90. She's not
Yes.
doing a capital request for that upfront. But in the future, if she elected to, that would be something that I would propose that we would look at, if it was leveraging state funds to actually, a significant portion of state funds that's gonna pay for it. I think that's a very important.
I agree with you. You know, the
Okay.
thing is, as long as we as a committee are going to be taking money out of the capital budget, you know, the operating budget, and putting it towards a project, we have a say in it.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
If it's pure grant only,
Oh, yeah.
we need to be
Yeah.
notified, but we can't.
It's
we
outside
can't
the
say
realm.
yes, no.
If a form doesn't come in for it, I don't.
In
But per the policy, it's defined as a capital
capital
project,
expense,
and it should be,
Oh, it should be.
Right.
it should be
but-
listed. Just
But
like
if it's over
if it's,
20.
it's the source of funding is not our issue. If it's a capital expense, that's fine. If it's
This is kind of an interesting point. If it's not paid for by the town of Belchertown, if
Right.
it's paid for from a grant from another body,
Right.
does it meet the threshold of the?
That's why we gotta ask others how they've done it.
I
And
believe-
this would be a DOR
I
question as
believe it
well.
meets the policy.
Yeah.
Okay, I
Um,
was just curious.
quick question for you. Did they have any kind of system at all set up where you used to work?
Not
Okay,
very.
Just curious.
well.
okay,
There was a
So-
committee,
yeah,
but it didn't vet. It wasn't a fully vetted process.
so I think we got a heck of an opportunity to create something positive in terms of how the information goes back and forth with the town.
I actually called Linda earlier today, and the reason I called was what I was reading to Steve earlier. And I did send this to the town clerk too, because I wanted to bring it up today. That the two items, I printed out a copy for everybody, but in a proposition overhead, proposition 2.5 override, the money can only be spent on what the ballot
Right.
question says the first year.
Exactly.
That's why I asked Steve
Yeah.
if operational
Yeah, that's-
expense would
yep.
count for this. And he's gonna look into it, but otherwise you'd have to revise the
Yeah, exactly.
the warrant article to use money regularly raised by the town to.
I'm the one who needs them.
Oh, you too. I don't know, do you want them?
That's the
That's a
ballot.
ballot
That's
question
not a ballot.
And the warrant article for capital. I just think that as a committee, we'd want to advocate.
So the
Oh, I'm
warrant
sorry.
article, this is the free cash warrant article.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
that's it.
not-
So that needs an action. The 420 couldn't be spent by town departments, just deciding that there's 420 free cash and that's where.
It needs an action plan. And I,
Is that to spend any free cash, not just this 420 assigned to all spending of free cash, these warrant articles?
Yes.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't just pull money out, or you have to, if you're gonna realign the use of free cash, you have to do it on the floor of the town meeting with a vote of town meeting to back you up. You can't just arbitrarily move money.
yeah, and I am really concerned about the language. I mean, I'm not going to say anything. I just want them, because they can really easily make this work with another warrant article added and say we will take from, to replace. So the proposition 2.5 money would replace operating expense that we could use for capital.
Yeah.
At town meeting.
And is there
So
only?
what's
I
your
thought there
concern?
was- I thought there were more town budgets getting funding, not just school, municipal, sorry.
So is your concern about the language on the ballot itself?
Yeah,
Ballot question.
And the ballot question
Purpose of
is,
funding municipal and school
It's just
operating
operating.
budgets only.
right,
But
so-
this will be further defined in the town meeting documents in terms of how it's being allocated.
But I believe the ballot, it has to be spent for the ballot question.
Right.
It's a two-part thing. And,
I don't have the expertise to question how they put the language together.
so my understanding of the 2.5 is that we are going to approve or not 2.5% over whatever the dollar value is, 2 million, whatever, for the purpose of putting this into the operating budget,
Right.
but not where it goes in that operating budget.
It's capital and operating budget. item.
So,
Right.
That's the question.
That's the
We've-
question before town meeting.
right, so in the past, we've bought trucks without a capital.
Of course,
Out of
Right.
operating budget.
and we certainly can do
We
that.
bought ambulances. We bought all kinds of capital stuff.
No, I agree.
You know?
I absolutely agree with that. That's why I said it could be corrected if the warrant article at town meeting is done properly. That's all.
Okay.
That's all it is.
Yeah, the warrant article has to spell out exactly what
Right,
it's for.
right, yeah.
But what is good about where we're at on this process now is, as I understand it, there'll be one budget at town meeting to be voted on. It either will include the override or it won't include the override numbers. So we won't have two sets of numbers to vote on,
Correct.
which is way better. That was gonna be a long meeting. So we are in an excellent place.
Yeah, my concern is that they look at the, 2.9 million override and then see another 420 thinking, oh, they want 420.
No, these aren't done at the same time. This is done
No, no.
later at town meeting.
I know that, but, so I'm hoping it's written that they understand it's for free cash.
So next meeting, I will invite Ira to come visit us from the town of South Hadley and talk about his experiences. And next meeting, we'll begin to talk about process and how we're gonna organize this. And if you wanna write along,
I have some ideas on it.
unless the committee decides we wanna move the meeting that night to accommodate your schedule. What's your schedule like? Like,
It's just that week of God.
And
The
for
week
me,
of May.
June 11th, my daughter's gonna be having a baby that period. of
God
time.
bless her.
And
Do we want to,
I could do the following week. Or I could do the third or the fourth week of May.
what do we wanna do, gentlemen?
I can't do last week.
Okay, then let's make it the third week of,
We
third
do-
Wednesday of every month.
that works.
What I don't want to have is the second Wednesday this month and the third Wednesday next month and the
Okay,
first Wednesday the month after. So the third Wednesday of every month.
that works.
That works.
Just add 7 to everything and we got 21 and 18.
So May 21,
Yes.
third Wednesday.
So the 21st.
Why don't we,
I'm
yeah,
gonna head out. When you get your form going, if you want, maybe
Please.
send it to Eric and I and just see how usable it is, if we have comments.
We'll make it like 5 times longer, you know.
We're gonna need your fingerprints.
So let's do this. Let's take the radical move of having a vote as a committee to when our meetings are gonna be.
All right,
Okay.
bye.
I'll accept a motion that we will meet on the 3rd Wednesday of every month.
Motion.
So moved.
All right, any other discussion? Now that we're laying this down. All in favor?
Aye.
There we go. We did it.
We got something done today.
If we have a CBA meeting, I won't even have to leave the room afterwards.
Exactly. There we go.
Steve Martin, one of his comedy routines, when they were trying to figure out what to be. He's like, yeah, and
Uh,
then never does.
Third Wednesday
Of each month. All right.
of each month.
I think I really wanted to have your voice in the room, so. All right. Make tonight an easy meeting.
Just tell Ira he doesn't have to go over what happened.
Oh.
to Goshen.
I know I've asked this
I
in
know
the
what happened
past.
in Goshen.
Ira's
No, and that's
last
with
name,
capital plan.
Brzezinski.
With capital plan.
PR.
That's what
Easy. INSK.
Ooh, is it a Y or an I? Can't remember.
I.
No, I know. The ayes have it.
Awesome. Are we good, gentlemen?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
I'll
it?
take a
We're not
motion to
gonna attack
adjourn.
We're not gonna attack. the
So
form.
move.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Do we like an informal rule of an hour and a half, kind of at the most?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm gonna do 4 to 5:30 on the room.
Okay.
Okay. Just,
Wait, are we still on?
yeah, we're
Oh, we
still,
have to shut it off.
yeah.
You got it, Brian?
Well, this is tough to way to shut it off, right?
I think you just.
Yeah, you hit the red leave button.
My motor skills allow me.
Leave sent.